Okay, well, we've got 4 minutes to kill. So if the panelists want to go on mute and turn off their videos for 2 minutes, reapply
You
lipstick.
want us to turn our videos off?
No, you can do whatever you want.
Fair enough.
Hi, Liz. We're just giving people a couple of minutes to join.
Sounds good.
We'll get things kicked off right at noon.
Excellent.
Mountain time.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll get started in 1 minute. I'm gonna turn my video on. Okay, well, I like meetings to start on time, and I know probably everybody else here does as well. So good afternoon, panelists and participants. Really appreciate you participating in what I think is going to be a substantial and lively conversation based on the discussions we've had leading up to this. We're going to cover everything from digital marketing to sector development and collaboration in the legal marketing profession. As probably most of you know, 20 years ago, I don't even think this was a function or a real profession. The department was probably a lawyer that had stepped back from their practice, and they were moonlighting as a marketer, designing Christmas cards and leading the occasional proposal. And then I think they wised up and realized there was hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, and law firms started to hire marketing and business development professionals to lead strategy and to attract and retain clients. And I think we continue to be a relatively new career. So I think it's great that we're congregating to share in our lived experiences. I'm Robin Buse. I'm the Chief Business Development and Marketing Officer at Burnett, Duckworth & Palmer. It's a Calgary-based full-service firm with about 120 lawyers. I'm responsible for marketing, communications, sector diversification, chief cook, bottle wash, all the good things. And I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues today from across the country. I've actually asked them to introduce themselves because I think it's far more interesting for people to lead that conversation. So Liz, you want to get things started off and tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Oak, and I am the digital strategy lead at BLG. But I work part-time with BLG. I also work with a major national bank in Canada and a few other clients. So it's really good for me to kind of mix things up. What I do at BLG is I work on all of the digital strategy. I have a team that works with me to develop all of the different initiatives across the digital landscape. And I'm excited to share with you some things that we've been doing, especially with the pandemic. Things have changed pretty drastically. I also teach at University of Toronto and the Canadian Marketing Association. So happy to be here. So I'm going to pass it over to Jillian.
Well, hi, everybody. Great to be here. My name is Jillian McCormick. I'm the National Director of Clients and Industries with Bennett Jones. We are a national law firm, and as such, my role is also national. I've been with Bennett Jones for about 5 years, and for better or for worse, I did not come from a legal industry background, so I do bring a little bit of a different perspective to this conversation. And listen, we have an amazing group of marketing professionals in our team, so I don't pretend to be the pro at this. In fact, I probably feel a little bit more like an imposter, but I like to basically summarize my role as future-proofing our business. And of course, marketing more broadly and business development is certainly a big piece of that. So what I bring to the table is really an eye for industry strategy and trends and client context, really, in everything we do. So with that, I will pass it over to Cassandra.
Thank you, Jillian, and good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Cassandra Hallett. I'm the Business Development Manager in Western Canada for Miller Thomson. So Miller Thomson is a national law firm. We have just over 11 offices and edging around over 500 lawyers across the country. And in my role, I work with our lawyers throughout our Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, and Regina offices. So just a small portion of them. But amongst that role, being in Western Canada, I have a lot of my mandate is to liaison with our national teams that are based out of Toronto, which can be an interesting aspect to the conversation as well. I'm also, in addition to actively holding a professional role in the legal industry, I am currently an MBA candidate with Queen's University. And so that does, as we were going through some of the conversations, it was interesting to recognize a little bit of an academic perspective that was brought to some of these as well. I'm so happy to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to an insightful conversation over the next hour. Back to you, Robin.
Thank you. So obviously we have an incredible group of people. My job is just to keep things moving. So let's kick it off by framing the discussion around developing a digital marketing strategy. And Liz, I'm hoping you can kick things off and talk about, how somebody on this call could think about tackling, developing one, who you might need to engage, why strategy is important.
Right.
If you could frame that conversation and get things kicked off, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So BLG had the good fortune of having our website launch, like our new website launch on February 2020. So a month before all the madness began with the pandemic. And basically kind of what we've done with strategy. So I started with BLG in January 2020. And so I just kind of took a look around, and one of the big things that we've been doing the last couple of years before even getting to the digital strategy part is developing a lot of tools, like educational tools, because part of my role, I find, is also educating. So it's educating people on what SEO is, educating people on why we want to do search engine optimization, and making sure, looking at the data that we can collect and be able to then make the case of here's why digital marketing is important. And I mean, sometimes you do have to have that conversation. With some lawyers, it's like, yeah, get it. Some, you do have to educate them and get them understanding why social media is important, why it's important for them to use social media to help bring out their personal brand. So what I do as strategy is I will do a yearly, like, firm-wide strategy on digital marketing, and we have a heavy emphasis on SEO, but we also look at other tactics as well. And then we also talk to different sectors and practices about individual strategies for them specifically. So that's kind of the approach that we take in terms of the people that we get to engage. Obviously it's with the bigger marketing team. We do have, we do work with the business development, all of our different business development contacts. We make sure that they kind of help to sell the idea actually for practices and sectors to actually put together a focused digital strategy for their different teams. So it really is a partnership between marketing and business development, and also combining that education piece for lawyers to really buy into the idea.
Yeah, that's interesting to start with education. Jillian, where did you start, and what are some of the things you can share about your strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll back up a touch and just sort of answer the question as to why you actually need one, because I think that is sort of a fundamental piece of our conversation today. And listen, I think we've all heard the term content is king. Essentially, if you are not online and you do not have an online content presence, you're invisible. It's quite as simple as that. You're not conspicuous in your absence. You're actually just inconspicuous at all. You're just not there. So, I mean, that's really the fundamental reason as to the why behind the what. But also, I mean, this kind of activity really drives engagement with the lawyers directly, with the thought leaders. It drives inquiry levels, as a matter of fact. I mean, there's some data from the Global Legal Post that talks about driving this engagement with your firm following some kind of digital marketing strategy, whether it's a podcast or a webinar or simply just a blog. So, that really is the long and short of it. I mean, I like to sort of frame it as, if you're looking for any type of business service, or any type of service for that matter, if you're doing your initial research as a buyer, where do you go? You go online, right? So I know that we all spend time on directories, and I don't intend to talk about that, but really making sure that you do have that online presence is really, really critical. Not only do the buyers see your presence, but also influencers of purchasing of legal services see it. And they see you as thought leaders. So that really becomes an opportunity for you to create a broader funnel, I would say, for your approach to your business development strategy. So really, unless you're investing, or even if you are investing heavily in search engine optimization, content and clicks just really, really matter. And I'm happy to sort of think about where you start, but you really have to start with the objective. So who are you trying to reach? What are you trying to reach them about? And the most important question is, why should they care? So that's really the starting place for any type of strategy, as far as I'm concerned, let alone sort of your digital marketing strategy. So maybe I'll just pause there and see if Liz wants to jump in. Or sorry, Cassandra, you haven't spoken yet. I apologize.
That's quite all right. I think, Liz, between yourself and Jillian, I really think that you've nailed it right on the head, but I'll just be very succinct and additive here. The first point being, if we as firms don't have a digital strategy, we're not visible. We're missing out on so many opportunities for just brand recognition within our own marketplace. It's really, really detrimental. But the other side to that, and Liz touched on this a little bit with the education point of really trying to educate our lawyers and our powers that be as to why search engine optimization matters. Really, educating behind what the additional value of a digital marketing strategy is. and that when it's executed properly, it gives you the most valuable thing that you can possibly get, and that's data and response rates and client behaviors, and it helps you better understand your clients and the markets that you're trying to serve through all of these results that you're able to capture through these campaigns. So it's an interesting approach when you, especially when you're dealing with some smaller office markets. Like, let me tell you, the data strategy conversation does not look the same with my Calgary market as it does with my Saskatoon market. So it's very interesting, and it can sometimes carry the need for a very heavy educational point to that conversation.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's so important to connect, as you all have, digital strategy with adding top line revenue. And it's always, a challenge to do that. And I think that that's part of the education, obviously. So when you're thinking about developing one, if I'm on this call and I'm like, I'm really starting to grapple with how to develop one of these, Cassandra, did you engage an external consulting firm to support you, or was this something that your team did in-house?
This was something, so we do have a designated marketing communications team within our overarching markets department. And this is something that they do, and they do very, very well. When it comes to starting any kind of specific digital strategy, and I'm approaching this from a regional standpoint, you really do have to be prepared to employ some of the initial business planning within your own local teams, and then be prepared to be able to make a business case, because those resources are going to be the most important thing. We don't want to go and make a budgetary ask for a couple of $1,000s just to say that we're doing something only to have it not deliver anything. We want to make sure that we're fully aware of what it is that we need to deliver an effective program, and be very realistic about the resources, whether that's cost or time that's required for it. And so engaging our marketing department in that, our marketing communications team within our department in that is paramount to making sure that we have the accurate information to be able to bring that request forward. So really trying to get it started is doing the initial boots on the ground strategy and planning, and identifying those markets and those clients that we are trying to reach, engaging our marketing teams, our communication teams for the content itself and the tone of what it is that we're going to be putting out there, and then making sure that we've come together to have an accurate cost representation and ask for those resources.
Liz, you're obviously a hired gun. You've got a very specific expertise that the firm has, engaged you to bring. Can you talk a little bit about that approach?
So you mean like in terms of like how I'm utilized, or do you mean like my approach to digital strategy?
How you're utilized and how the firm.
Okay. So basically, like I work with the firm. I'm dedicated to the firm 2 to 3 days a week. And I lead a lot of the digital strategy initiatives. So anything that has to do with digital strategy, whether it's sector focused or it's focused on a particular practice, or anything that's kind of overarching for the firm, is what I lead with. So I do a lot of SEO work, but a lot of times, we also have an external vendor that helps us with actually putting the data to work. So I manage a lot of different vendors as well to help us move our digital strategy forward. One big thing that I do is I work with a lot of different teams on, defining those business objectives. So what Cassandra had touched on as well is making sure we're crystal clear before we start the strategy that we're defining the business objectives. They're things that are realistic, they're time-based, they're things that we can measure against. Once those are defined, then we start looking at building that funnel. So, what do we want to do, especially with campaigns? And I know we're going to get into this a little bit later in the conversation, but defining like what are the KPIs at each part of the funnel. So at the awareness stage, consideration, acquisition, retention. So I map out those kinds of things. So when I first started BLG, Again, it was a lot of education. So putting together educational tools, videos, guides for lawyers and for BD, and even for the marketing team to educate them on digital. And we still use a lot of these tools to this day for people that need it. We do drop-in sessions for lawyers on how to utilize LinkedIn, like how to maximize your LinkedIn profile, how to use our social media advocacy tools. So we have all that. And then I also lead a team of digital marketers who have different functions. We have people that are working on the website. We have people working on like content development. So those kinds of things. So I kind of help oversee and provide mentorship to the team in that way.
Great. So speaking of education, this is a word that was used in framing the discussion today. Can somebody jump in, and I'll let you decide who, and describe to us what the heck is a persona? So if I'm joining the call specifically because I'm interested in personas, what is a persona? And, can you tell our audience if you've developed them and how you use them, and if, it's been a useful tactic for your firm?
Well, I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in because, again, I freely admit I am not a marketing professional. So when we were talking initially about the whole idea of personas, I always think about who are you trying to reach, right? So then let's back it up from there. And as I mentioned before, it's not just the person who's purchasing legal services. You also want to appeal to their bosses and their bosses' bosses, right? When it comes to, things like topics like ESG, for example. I mean, that's maybe not necessarily a direct connect with somebody who's purchasing legal services, but it sure as heck is on the mind of their board members and of their C-suite. So I think you really need to start with, and this kind of dovetails a little bit with the last question, and I won't be duplicative because I think Liz and Cassandra did a great job of answering that. But you really do need to start with your strategy. So if you have an industry team strategy, what do you want to achieve? Who are you trying to reach out to? What kind of messaging are you trying to get across? And that really helps you define your persona, because like I say, sometimes you're actually selling to the board. Sometimes you're selling to the C-suite. You're trying to evoke either risk or opportunity or sort of, that risk and crisis management sweet spot, I would say. But really, it's kind of like that old adage of what interests my boss should fascinate me. It's really what interests my clients should fascinate me, and making sure that there's always that client lens on the content that you're developing, how it's being distributed, and why they should care. And if you can connect those dots, you're in really good shape. The only thing I'll add to that is that I'm sure many of you talk to clients who are overwhelmed with information, and they do look to our lawyers and even ourselves to help them wade through, what's just a sea of information. And again, connecting those dots between what this says and why it should matter to your business. That is really, if you can figure that out, that's gold.
On a webinar.
Right. Can I just make sure everybody who's participating in the webinar is on mute? We're picking up some noise. Liz, did you want to jump in and talk about personas specifically?
Yeah, for sure. So I love it. Like that, what Jillian mentioned was bang on. Just to kind of like share our experience. So we will, like, a persona is basically like a fictional character that embodies the ideal actual person that you're trying to reach. So we do it from a sector or a practice specific. Like when we do a strategy for those, we construct one or two personas. So for example, in the automotive sector, there might be two personas, one being the car dealership owners, and then the other being the actual manufacturers. So we've got these two different distinct personas that we're trying to reach. But a lot of times we just kind of limit it to one, like our hero kind of person, and it could be someone from the C-suite. It could be someone from like in-house counsel. So we tend to look at the persona as, you know, someone who's new to the firm, like not an existing client, although that depends on the situation. But for example, we have one persona, I have it up on screen. His name's International Trade Tim. And basically that's for our international trading practice. And basically, like, we'll name out all the job titles that this person could have. We think about, like, what is their education, what industry they're in, what location are they in, and like those kinds of demographic information can really help us when we're doing targeted advertising on, say, LinkedIn or something like that. We look at what are their job responsibilities. So we'll actually look on LinkedIn and look at our ideal, you know, LinkedIn profiles and just see what their, you know, what the job descriptions are, responsibilities. We define their goals. What are they trying to achieve, and how is it what is it that we can do as a firm to help them? We talk about what are their frustrations in their job. What is something that they're frustrated about that we can add value for them? What tools and tech are they using? What information sources do they go to? Do they use Google? I mean, most people do, but you know what I mean? Like, what kind of publications or associations do they belong to? What is their preferred communication? How do they want information served to them? And lastly, what is their decision criteria for working with a firm? So we really kind of get deep on, you know, do they ask around for referrals? A lot of times they do, but they might also have other criteria or questions that they're asking a prospective law firm that they are looking to work with. So we look at those kinds of aspects, and then that helps us then put together an editorial calendar, content calendar that is really audience centric, really focused on the client.
That's fantastic. What a great answer. Did either of the other panelists want to jump in, or should we call that?
Well, I want to know why you didn't say mine was a great answer, Robin. But
Oh,
I thought they were
yours are great too, by the way.
I have, you know, and Liz, I'm just going to kind of riff off of your answer there, because you were very, you defined very well that you like to apply these client personas to new clients rather than existing clients. And I think this is a great example of where some of the mandates for business development versus digital marketing and strategy can really differ, but also be so important to work together. You know, within my role, especially, you know, I had more of a regional focused role within a national firm. You know, yes, this client persona that we develop really is a depiction of our target client. But one thing that we've realized is a lot of the market research that we need, and like the data that we might need to be able to build this profile out, might already be available to us through client behaviors of current firm clients in different markets, especially if we're talking about bigger brands that kind of cross borders provincially. So, you know, these, and similar to us is what Liz was talking about, like these personas encompass our client behavior patterns, the motivations, challenges, what they want to achieve, where some of their pain points might be. But the important takeaway from it is that this client persona, and Liz pretty much just provided the entire roadmap for how to develop kind of an active tool to use, but it really is that, like, it is a tool that can enable your team to better understand all of these different sets of clients. And when it comes to an internal business development standpoint, can help you better understand where these clients might find value within specific practice areas of your firm that they're not already engaging. So that's an equal external to internal benefit that can come from being able to access a persona tool.
Cassandra, I'm gonna get you to keep talking, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here.
Perfect.
Because I think it's useful to bring things to life in these discussions beyond sort of rhetoric and strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you provide us with an example of, could be a broad or niche campaign that you've led, and tell us what was successful about it, how it was designed. If you could just sort of bring this to life for the audience, I think that would be really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I'm not going to take all the credit for this because, again, a lot of this conversation is identifying how, the business development and strategy works effectively with our marketing and communication strategy. And this is definitely one of those examples. I'm sure Liz has a million examples. Jillian has a million examples like this too. One of the biggest niche campaigns that we point to over and over and over again, and I'm going to speak in very descriptive terms here. It was a digital content campaign that we structured for one of our practice groups. And the success of this niche campaign really started in engaging that initial strategy and planning and looping in our marketing communications department right away to start identifying keyword searches before we even started writing the content, but to really focus on developing specific content in a series that this targeted client was actually interested in, and we had the research to back it up that they were searching for using these particular keywords. And this is another part of the conversation that's equally important to have when it comes to developing that content for those clients is what type of language are you using? Trying to encourage people to sometimes stay away from the overly technical search word terms and moving more towards how the client would actually look to engage these resources through their own language and how they would talk about these things. So through our marketing and communications team, we focused on the keyword phrases that were showing up with very, very high searches, but low competition. And for anybody on this call who's ever seen a spreadsheet with those, the amount of work that your marketing and digital strategy team puts into delivering these, it's just pages and pages and pages of results of keywords. So from there, we drafted the content around a keyword search that came out for us. And we specifically tailored this strategy to the niche market for the client that we were trying to serve. And what was interesting about this is that this entire niche content and this niche campaign, did have a relatively low investment. And it had a very, very high value approach to it in the end. Here's the key to that though. In order to execute effectively on something like that, it does require regular content development. And this is where the business development managers really do need to kind of pull their weight along with the digital strategy team, because it's kind of on us to make sure that our lawyers have what they need to be able to stay on track with this content development. You have to maintain the best practices and making sure that everything is structured with those keyword searches in mind. And you have to have patience and consistency to be able to see these results. So we saw a successful niche campaign in about 6 to 9 months with posting 2 to 3 times a month. And it's always so funny to me to say those numbers right off the top. It really doesn't seem like it's that much. It's not like we're asking for 50 articles, but anybody on this call who's ever tried to chase a lawyer to publish something before knows it is a lot of effort. So the consistency is key. Now, sorry, I don't want to keep talking too long, but I do want to wrap this up because this particular campaign that I'm referring to, it's important to note that these niche campaigns, when they are executed effectively, they have an incredible amount of longevity. So this particular practice group that we did the campaign for has had a lot of turnover. They're not that active anymore. We actually haven't published that much for them in the last couple of years. But since that time, the one campaign that we did for that practice group, in comparison to one-off articles and content that has been put out since then, that campaign is still consistently delivering inbound leads. Whereas these one-off efforts that weren't focused on more of a series and a keyword search to a specific niche market, they're just there. So it's really interesting to see that contrast between when you follow the best practices, maintain consistency, and have the patience to be able to deliver this and have those internal teams working together. It's really incredible what you can produce like that versus when it's just a one-off off the corner of your desk because somebody told you to get something up on the website. I'd be so interested to kind of hear what Liz or Jillian have to add to that though.
Liz, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I agree. Like SEO, like I mentioned, is a huge focus for us. But like to talk about particular campaigns, I mean, when Cassandra was talking about her example, I think like from my perspective, like if you're struggling to reach a niche audience that maybe you don't have like a lot of exposure to, like we at BLG, we've got so many different sectors and practice groups. Like there's some like really niche places where the lawyers are like, nah, we're good, we're busy enough, we don't need any help. But then there's some that they do need help in reaching their audiences, especially international audiences. And so those kinds of campaigns that we do, we'll put some money behind it. Like, for example, you know, I have one lawyer who he writes really great content, and it's listicles. It's like top 10 tips when considering like doing business in Canada. Like that's a terrible title, by the way. You never, you know, that's not great. But, you know, he does these really pretty easy read like type articles, and the target group is US firms. So it could be firm lawyers, but it also could be CEOs, and it has to do with mergers and acquisitions. So if US companies are thinking about doing some M&A in Canada, you know, I work with this one lawyer and I'm like, here's some content you can produce, and let's do a really cool looking ad campaign on LinkedIn. And so, you know, he's produced like a couple articles this year. We have the theme around football because, you know, that's very American. And we're finding that we're getting a lot of traffic from that audience. And we put some money behind it using LinkedIn ads. Like we're not shy about, you know, sometimes we've had resistance from lawyers saying like, no, we shouldn't use, you know, ads. It looks cheap or looks desperate. No, it doesn't. It actually, especially on LinkedIn, like a lot of people can't tell if an ad is promoted, if it looks very similar to whatever else is on your news feed. And so, you know, we've worked on making this ad look really cool. We've got a really nice, really kind of fun, like analogy around football. You know, we have a really awesome content writer on our team that has an ad agency background. So she does something really catchy, and it catches a lot of attention, and it's not a lot of investment. So like those kinds of campaigns can be really great. I'll just say one other one though, like what's a campaign that maybe didn't do so well and we learned from is we did one campaign where the lawyers were really pushing us about saying that we're #1 in this and that in Canada. And I kind of pushed back and said, you know, people don't really care about that. They want to know how you know their business and how you add value to them. And there was a lot of resistance back, and I was like, okay, let's just do this campaign. We're #1, and it didn't do well. And it's because we're not being client centric. We're not going back to the persona and looking at what keeps our client up at night. What is some content that we could produce that has utility, where they might see it on LinkedIn and go, oh, that's a really cool report, or that's a really cool article. Go read it. And like it's like building that awareness of our brand and of that practice group and of that lawyer.
Liz, I so appreciate you having the courage to talk about something that didn't work. Because we've all done it, and I think we can learn probably even more from each other if we talk about what didn't work or failures. Jillian, do you have any examples that you would want to share? Either successes or things that you learned from?
Yeah, well, I learned from both. I think, like you say, we can often learn very, very, very deeply from our failures or what we perceive to be failures. But you know, I think the important thing to remember is to Liz, what Liz was talking about, and Cassandra as well, is making sure that you have a client lens on everything. And we can get very technical when it comes to personas or search engine optimization or keyword searches. But what I'll tell you is it's also incumbent upon us to be curious about the client. And by that, I mean, if it's a public company, they give you that information for free in their disclosure documents in many cases about what they're paying attention to, what they're interested in, having those conversations. We do a lot of sort of feedback or client experience interviews with our clients as well. And I will tell you one thing is they are happy to offer up, what is keeping them up at night and what they are looking ahead to. And that's much more important than sort of pressing a button as to what's the hot topic of today. Not to say that that's not important and to get away from that, but I do think if we can help them solve their business problem of tomorrow, you will earn a seat as a trusted advisor, which of course is all of our goals. It's even our goals as marketing folks to earn and own that seat as a trusted advisor around the table when it comes to industry teams, or when it comes to practice groups, or when it comes to having these client meetings. You need to own that seat at the table and not blink. So I didn't mean to get away from your question, Robin, but when it comes to things that maybe haven't been so successful, as humans, we make assumptions. As humans, we get really interested in and invested in ideas that we think are the next big thing. And sometimes we do need to tap the brakes and make sure that we're sort of gaining that that level of buy-in from those who will be publishing. We need to, to really make, like I say, just make sure that we're not sort of being blind and having our sort of blinders on and speaking in an echo chamber about stuff that we know that they should be interested in, but perhaps we haven't done a great job behind the scenes of sort of gathering those proponents. Yeah.
You work for a large national firm. Can you talk to us about how your reach and your structure influence your approach to marketing?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. I mean, it comes down to collaboration. I mean, if you think it's easy to collaborate across, multi offices across sort of a national scope, we'd be kidding ourselves. It takes a lot of attention, a lot of effort every single day to make sure that we're teaming and collaborating. And I do recognize that during the pandemic, we've had some challenges when it comes to not getting to know lawyers, not getting to know other lawyers in other offices, for example, and being able to have that kind of organic type of collaboration. So I like to call our department the Chief Dot Connecting Department, truthfully, because we do have team members across the country, all of whom have earned seats as trusted advisors with lawyers in their offices. And then we come together and we encourage those dots to be connected when it comes to ideation around client strategy, around industry strategy, again, around what are those trends that we need to be paying attention to, and making sure that we're not getting siloed, because that's always a tendency. We're always happy to talk about stuff that we know a lot about, and by we I mean the collective we, the lawyers and the non-lawyers, truthfully. But how do you sort of ask some of those probing questions, and how do you come to the table with interesting ideas that maybe not everybody's thought about? That's where we as a team and we as marketing professionals really add value into those conversations and encourage that collaboration regionally, nationally, up and down the elevator, truthfully, in our own offices. But without that collaboration, it really diminishes the return of your investment.
Cassandra, can you jump in and talk about some tactics that you use to connect with your peers across the country to align on marketing strategy and execution?
Yeah, and it's really such an important conversation, especially, and Jillian alluded to this too. I mean, the challenges that we all had to experience throughout COVID, and then, what to do after that. Now that is not such a prevalent reality right now that things are starting to go back to normal, that's as much of a shift as it was when we all had to go back to our home offices, and to identify that it's really important to be able to make that time to connect with everybody. And it's funny. So my teams, one of our favorite phrases is profile raising. And we use the term profile raising just as externally as far as what our intentions are to get our brand out there as we do internally as for what our intentions are to be able to get our marketing department's profile out there in front of our lawyers, because there are a lot of lawyers out there that haven't had a chance to connect with our group one-on-one. There are a lot of lawyers out there that didn't have business development budgets in the last couple of years. And this is maybe just kind of a new thing that they're getting back into on how to access that and what resources are available to them. So at a very tactical level, how to encourage that team collaboration on my team's side. We do a lot of remotes. We've got a lot of scheduled reoccurring meetings. I am one of the few that's based out of Western Canada and reports to Toronto. So in terms of my team interaction, that does need to be remote. But in terms of my office interaction, it really is about the profile raising. It's really about making sure that the lawyers understand that we are here and we're here to work with them and try to help them achieve their objectives, and remembering to put ourselves in front of them. We want to be as proactive as possible. You know, I'd love to make sure that we're there answering questions that they haven't even thought of yet. And sometimes it's as easy as putting some feelers out there. I work with multiple practice groups. I know that's not always the case in national firms. A lot of the time it's very focused on one, but I will make sure that I'm in constant touch with our practice group leads to make sure that we have a spot on the agenda for those practice group meetings. Now that the world has opened back up, I've started doing road shows again. So every couple of weeks, I'm on an hour-and-a-half flight somewhere to go and visit one of our offices out here. And we, you know, as effective as we've been over the last couple of years doing things virtually, it is easy to forget how important that contact can be across the boardroom table too, especially if you are working in some smaller markets that might feel a little detached from the greater scope of what's going on within your firm, which is a whole other conversation. And I know we've all experienced it, so that's not at all a surprise on this call. But just purely from a tactical point, it would be think about those profile raising activities. And if there is one thing that anybody on this call could really do today, if you feel like you're kind of having, you know, suffering with your team from a low profile, maybe the lawyers don't know, I would encourage you to think about, you know, is it reasonable for you to open up a virtual business development or marketing roundtable and to send out a large invite? You run the risk of nobody wanting to show up, but you at least offer the invitation that it's there if somebody does want to access those resources. Start asking at an administrative and operational level about when these practice group meetings are happening, and then think of something of value that you might be able to take 5 minutes to talk to those groups about. So that would profile raising in terms of communication and letting our lawyers know that these resources are available. It really does take some active and proactive engagement to be able to get there.
You're right. And you know, gaining mind share with the lawyers is always a challenge. And I know it's something that we share. And I know everybody on the call is nodding as you're talking about it. Liz, I'm wondering if you can discuss the relationship between business development and marketing in your firm. I have a very advantageous position in mind because I get to play both of those roles. So I get to fight with myself. But I'm wondering if you can discuss how you navigate the relationship between those two groups to maximize the effectiveness of what you're trying to accomplish.
Right. So at BLG, we are kind of going through like a bit of a change in how we approach BD and marketing and breaking down those, the silo of those two. So I tend to interact a lot with different BD members. Like I have, I think the fact that I know it sounds so old fashioned, but we do have socials. We do have events where BD and marketing get together like every quarter, just to get to know each other better. And that way you kind of understand who does what. And obviously like we also have meetings every week. Where we all come together and talk about different things, especially like our regional leaders, BD leaders with marketing, to really understand what's happening and how we can work more together. I find like just networking with different BD people has really helped me gain exposure and getting them curious about digital marketing. And so that really helps. In terms of like, you know, anything other than that. I think that's kind of where we do it. I'm not sure if Jillian and Cassandra have different ways of approaching, like bringing those two.
And sometimes the old-fashioned way is the right way to do things. So I don't think we should be apologetic about wanting to connect. Jillian, do you have any thoughts on this topic? I'm sure you do.
I mean, you have to connect. There's no other way of doing it, whether you are in BD or marketing, or even with our lawyers, we were talking about, you know, Cassandra made a really good point about letting them know who you are. So you have a persona, right? With these groups where you're trying to add that value. There's no way around human to human interaction. And so, you know, I strongly encourage, when you can be in an office and go and do your tours around the office, because that sort of water cooler conversation, there's nothing that can replace that. I know during the pandemic, we all had to be very purposeful when it came to interaction, and it was very difficult to sort of have that sort of spontaneous conversation or overhearing things in the hallway. And I'm the nosiest person there is, so I will absolutely pick up on those hallway conversations and have a bit of a broader discussion. My role again is I head up our clients and industry strategy. So everything is both marketing and BD when it comes to what I do. It really is hand in glove, and your BD strategy should inform your marketing strategy. And I like to say, if you don't have a plan, then any path will take you to your destination. But yeah, I mean, I double down on what Liz talks about, and just making sure that you're making those connections.
Let me put you all on the spot. This is a power answer moment. So quick answer, succinct. What's one thing someone on this call could do tomorrow to improve engagement with the lawyers? Cassandra?
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna take an easy one out here, and I'm really gonna lean into hinging off the conversation we're having, and I kind of already mentioned in passing, but really being proactive in picking up, whether it's picking up the phone or asking for that meeting time, to make sure that you have a presence there. And remember, we touched on this a couple of times in the call today as well. Consistency in those actions is very key. Consistency in all the actions we've talked about on this call is key, but making sure that whatever it is that you are bringing does provide a value. We're not here to deliver a 30-minute, 45-minute presentation. We're here to be able to give them 5 minutes of a 30,000-foot view and let them know what their resources are and how to access us. And we want to be able to simplify it as much as possible. You know, at the end of the day, we are the marketing, communications, and business development professionals, and we want them to be able to trust us to reach out with something that they need to have done. And we want to be able to deliver that. So it's really just streamlining and simplifying how they access those resources and making sure that you're consistently in front of them.
Liz, one thing somebody could do tomorrow.
Pick a guinea pig. So basically what I mean by that is, like, I've done this where I'll talk to different lawyers, and like I have one lawyer who's always kind of sniffing around, and he's kind of curious about things, but he's always kind of scared to execute on digital. So, you know, I'll just like put a meeting in his calendar and give like an agenda, and then he'll join like every time. He never like reschedules. He's like, I want to hear what you have for me. And I'll give him some ideas and some things to chew on, and he loves it. I have another lawyer who's kind of new to the firm. He came last year, and him and I will have like these little conversations. I noticed that he's pretty good on LinkedIn. He's pretty confident speaker. And I'm like, hey, you know, I got this idea of like, let's do this like series of videos that, you know, we could put on LinkedIn and make it evergreen content so we can use it next year as well. And we actually just recently did it with him. So, you know, it's just kind of just picking a lawyer who seems like a safe space and seems open to new ideas, and just be like, hey, can I chat with you for like 10 minutes?
Great.
And it could turn into something pretty wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say pay attention to what they're paying attention to, or what they should be paying attention to. And by that, I mean, if you see an article on their client, send it through. Doesn't even matter if they saw it that very morning, send it through. They know you're thinking about them. Industry updates, things like that. Just a little piece of information that you know will add value to their day. Whether they've seen it or not, they'll know it came from you.
Thanks. I'm shocked that nobody said beer. 'Cause that's
Bribes.
just throwing it out there. Jillian, you haven't always worked in the legal profession, as you mentioned, and you've been in the business of supporting sector diversification in the previous life. How have you been getting lawyers to think through a sector lens or an industry lens versus a practice lens?
It's a good question, and I will freely admit that some of that work started before I arrived at Bennett Jones. In fact, one of the reasons I came to Bennett Jones was because of that strategy pivot. And I really thought that that would be an interesting journey. So it's all well and good to create a strategy. It's a whole other thing to implement it. So, it takes every single muscle of leadership by influence versus authority that you can possibly imagine. But again, I think when it comes to the why behind the what, which I always like to refer back to, clients think of themselves as belonging to an industry. They don't think of themselves as a tax client or a litigation client or whatever that happens to be. So I think the moment you pivot the conversation to be about the client, it kind of sets off a bit of a light bulb in most people's heads. Now, lawyers are trained to be risk averse and to pick holes in everything. So it does, so when they're actually engaging with you in a conversation to say, well, why, and tell me more about this, that's actually a good thing. If they didn't want you to be engaged, or if they didn't even want to be open to this idea, they just wouldn't give you the time of day. But again, I think it's about earning that seat at the table, and not giving it up to anybody, and like you say, not blinking when it comes to being able to, if you want to use the word, defend the strategy. But like I say, it just makes sense. It makes sense when it's through the lens, through the eyes of the client.
So thank you, Jillian. That's great. I know you have so much to say on this, and I know I'm just cognizant of time. We could have a whole other session on industry and sector focus. But law firms are not known for being bleeding edge on marketing tactics and approaches. So Cassandra, I'm just wondering if you're looking outside of the legal profession, if you can comment on where you might be finding some inspiration, if you're seeing trends from other sectors that you're integrating into your strategy, if there's particular companies you think are doing great job in B2B marketing, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would be happy to. And this is honestly, right now, this is a really big reoccurring conversation that we are having across all teams. I'm sure I'm not the only one on this call, especially with Liz's experience with firms outside of the one that she's with right now, but we are really focused on kind of observing, still within the professional services space, but what some of the other accounting firms are doing and their adoption of certain marketing and relationship development strategies are. So specifically, I'm really keen on watching the KPMGs and the Deloittes focus on their incubator programs and the growth catalyst programs. So, speaking to a Calgary market, because this is where we're really watching this right now, is this is a market that's primed for a bit more of a tech innovation sweep in the next, current standing moving through the next years, and then focusing on those startup companies within the technology innovation and how these professional services firms are really coming along and guiding them through this initial startup phase process in these incubator programs. It's an incredible strategy to me. I'm really keen on watching it unfold because it's really, you do have to have a long-term commitment and an understanding that those revenues aren't going to be there right at that moment, but it's also the most genuine focus on true business development and relationship building that I think I've really seen to be able to kind of bring a company up from the starting point through the phases of their next investor funding and helping them guide them through resources of where they're going to access this, and being there for their first big commercial lease when they finally get their office space, and then getting their employment work and so on and so forth. It's just a really innovative approach. Obviously, it takes a large level of commitment to be able to employ and execute on something like that.
That's a fantastic example, and thanks for being really specific about that. Liz, are you also, in your role, obviously you work with other sectors, is there one in particular that you're looking to that's inspiring your work?
I'll say one company is McKinsey, like big time. We look at McKinsey a lot because their thought leadership is just so good and has so much utility to it. And their website, like the way that their website is engineered too, like the UX design is pretty solid. So we're always looking at things that they're up to see how we can, add more value on our website, get more conversions, that kind of thing. But also look at the types of thought leadership that they're putting out. So right now we're thinking about like our year-end piece, what we're going to say. And we don't want to do the typical, like, here's the top, things or top things to look for and, predictions or, summary of like the whatever of the year that happened. Like, we're trying to find something that's a little bit more interesting and hard hitting. And so we always tend to look at McKinsey for ideas.
That's great. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to personally thank this panel. I known some of you beforehand. I've been a pleasure to get to know those of you who I haven't. It's amazing to see this level of talent in the legal marketing space. So I want to thank you all for being so candid and showing up here and just having an amazing conversation. Thanks to everybody who participated and attended the panel today. I hope you walking away with a couple of nuggets of new information. I know I've been taking notes, so thank you. And I just want to remind everybody, the LMA Canadian Regional Conference is taking place in Toronto on November 14th. It's a full day of education, an evening reception. Registration is going to be available next week. I'm really hoping that I can take the time and come and meet even more of you. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. And with that, thanks again. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.